My uncle had a horse. He lived up in the mountains. And so this horse's name was Tony. And for some reason, when I would go out in the pasture, I would call him and he would come to me. He didn't do that for everybody. He would come to me. So eventually, I was allowed to ride him, and I rode him bareback, no saddle. So I would just step up and grab a hold of his mane and swing up. And we'd take off galloping. And then one time, I decided I was going to ride with a saddle. Okay. So I got him saddled. I think I learned how to saddle a horse and put his bridle on and so forth. So anyway, this one day we were down on this dirt road below my uncle's home there in the hills. And I put my foot in the stirrup to get up. And he took off at a dead gallop. And I thought, I tried to get in the saddle and I lit behind the saddle. And I thought, this is not, and the reins were dragging. I didn't have a hold of them. I thought, I've got to get out of here, off of here. So I bailed off and went into the dirt alongside of the road, face first, and the horse went on. But my mother said afterwards that I told her, well, he took me under a tree. Well, she never believed that. No, she said, well, no, she didn't believe that. But anyway, that's what I told her. So my uncle got on that horse and he gave him a real run. But I still was a good friend to Tony. I loved horses, as I told you. So we would be up in the playground. I would go out and we would run around in the yard chasing each other, and I would whinny as a horse. I remember doing that. I had a car at that time. My adopted father bought me a car, and so I would drive that car, and we would, we'd travel around town and whatever. And so we'd go for rides with all of my friends and stuff. So I met my husband in 1956. It was kind of interesting. He had a friend at Dryden that worked at a service station up there. And one day, this friend, who was at that time dating Rita, he says, I've got to go down and meet my girlfriend. Would you like to go along? Ken said, sure. So he and Mel Cannon got in their car, and I believe it was Ken's car that Ken was driving. And they came down, and Rita and I were it was a drive around. It was called the Triple X Barrel. It was round, and you could drive clear around it. You had to park in the front, but you could drive around. And so he and Mel drove around, and Rita and I were inside, and I saw them drive around. I could still in my mind's eye see it. And I remember hearing later what Ken said to Mel. He said, when he talking to me, he says, what's with that? What's with the hair? Well, at that time I had gotten a poodle cut. And so Ken was being funny. He wanted to know, well, what's with the hair? So anyway, they pulled in the front and parked, and I think Rita and I went out, or they came in, but we ended up, I met him at the back of my car there. I had my car, and that's where I met him, right there. Oh yes, when we were in the drive-thru, I was with my mom and stepdad, and Ken was he came home every weekend and to see his family. Well, he also to see me. But anyway, so he pulled up behind my folks. They were in the drive-thru ahead of us. And he was a good friend with the lady that worked there. And he said, he spoke in through the microphone there. He says, tell her to get rid of the old lady and we'll get together. Well, my mother turned around And Ken just sunk down in his seat of the car like this. He didn't realize that he could be heard what he said, you know. He thought he was just talking to the lady in there, because she knew quite well. So anyway, that was kind of funny that we did get together. All of my pets were special. All of our pets were special. We had Rusty, who was a rescue. You know, he's a dog just came. I believe that was just before Ken and I were married. We'd gotten married. Rusty was in the back seat of the car. Had the kind of window down. It's kind of warm. Well, Ken turned and he went around the corner, turned a corner, and Rusty jumped out the window. So we had to stop and pull over and try to get him back into the car, which we did. We had Snoopy. Snoopy was in the house one day, and I had a long table in front of the couch, and I had a peanut shell in the shell, and I put the peanut on that edge of that little table, it's low, and he came over there. He picked up that peanut with his mouth and opened it up and ate the peanut. And Bumper, she was kind of I know one time Ken in the house, he was sitting on the couch, and Bumper came up off the back of the couch and jumped at him. And she didn't do that very long. I think she went outside. And then we also had Smitty. Smitty traveled back here when we gathered. She was a beautiful cat. Beautiful cat. She was a calico, yeah, beautiful cat. I thought this car went by and there was this, I thought it was a person, a lady, because it had the hair, you know. Well, come to find out, it was a dog sitting in there with the ears, you know, and I thought it was a woman. We were arguing, I don't remember discussing whether it was a natural color or not a natural color, because we thought we were talking about a person, okay? Well, when we found out it wasn't a person, then we suddenly realized, well, that's natural. That's a natural color. I don't remember who I was talking to. It might have been my mom, I don't know. It might have been I was talking with, I don't remember, but it was just kind of funny. Mom could have a sense of humor, but she could be very serious too, you know. I remember one time, I think I mentioned this earlier, she said, "Young lady, if I have to stand on a stepladder to spank you, I will do it." I don't know what I did, but she was that way, but she could also be funny, you know, but she was very straight and to the point. Do I have any experiences about Mount St. Helens? Yes, sort of. I remember that morning we had gone to church. We knew that they were having some eruptions over there. So we walked into the building that morning to church. And as we walked in, and Ken brought to this memory, this man said, did you hear about Mount St. Helens? And Ken said, no. What about it? He says it blew up. And Ken said, I just thought, big deal, so what? I'm 100 and some miles from it. So when we came out that morning and we looked up the Mission Ridge, which was probably 4,000 or 5,000 feet tall, high, Mission Ridge was tall, way up. And we saw this cloud like coming over the top of it, which it was from the volcano, And so we saw it coming. He says, I remember Ken said, boy, that looks like a nasty one. So that morning after church, we were going down to Mom and Dad's. They lived right close and have hamburgers. Ken was grilling hamburgers at the time. And he said suddenly he noticed that those hamburgers were starting to look dusty. And he suddenly realized that that's what it was. It was that ash that was coming. But we didn't get as much ash But I remember going home that day, after church, and I saw there was I left my kitchen window open, and there was a little bit of ash on the counter, enough that I had to wipe it off. But it wasn't as bad as some people had. They didn't know what to do with ash. What do you do with it? It doesn't melt. So they plowed it with snowplows to get it off the streets. I remember one other funny experience that happened with Ken and I. We were going home one day, and I don't know, Ken had I don't know if it was a gum wrapper or something in his hand, and he didn't realize that he had, I think it was a $10 bill in his hand, and he threw it out the window. He said, "Oh my goodness, I threw my money." That money went out the window, and I said, "Oh, what are we going to do?" He said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, just stop over here, and I'll get out and go get it." Of course, there was traffic, so he stopped, and it was blowing around in the middle of the intersection there, so I got out, and I went over, and I picked it up, and I got it. I think this biography is excellent to have for anybody who's thinking about having it, because you have it on record, and it's something that you can have forever, as long as you live, to share with your children and your grandchildren. And that is important, because we are to be an example, each one of us. So these are very important things, because as time goes by, and like it has with mine, you forget some things. So it's good to remember, and if you need to have a diary or something, write it down, which I didn't do. But that's a good idea, to have a diary to write down what happened today, what happened, if it's something, so you'll remember. Because believe me, when you get to be 86 years old, you don't remember like you used to, okay? So just remember.
How was your experience? Was it pretty relaxed? Were you nervous about it at first?
Well, I was kind of nervous, because I kind of thought about having this, if I would be able to remember, and or would I forget while I'm talking, because sometimes you do. And I'm thankful that you reminded me of some of the things that perhaps I had forgotten. So I appreciated that, okay? Mm-hmm. I think this is very important to have for posterity. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Thank you. That was it. You did
You're
very
done.
well.